Bennett Stirtz is the smartest player in college basketball. Let's lock in and find out why.
You are Locked On NBA Draft with no ceilings. Your daily podcast on the future stars of the NBA. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On NBA Draft with no ceilings. Thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. As always, guys, I'm Albert Gim, and I'm joined by my co-host, PhD in the pick and roll and the pepperoni pizza. We've got Corey Tulaba. Corey, we are recording today under some weird circumstances. I'm currently in an Airbnb on a business trip. Corey, you're recording from downstairs because your son's trying to go to sleep.
Yes.
Regardless of the situation, we are what they call ballers. We make things work. We find a way, and we're here today. Corey, how are you feeling? How is life? How's Mason doing? How's everything?
Mason turns 1 today, so very exciting day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, very, very exciting stuff. You know, funny, quickly on all the pizza talk, I had somebody reach out to me and, ask me, what my plans were in basketball on a DM. And they asked if I was just satisfied making pizzas, because I think they think that I was a pizza guy because of all our pizza talk.
That's maybe the best outcome ever.
Yeah.
For what this was. Yeah.
It's exactly the way we drew it up.
I mean, hey, Corey, looking at some of the pizzas you've been baking, someone might think that you were a professional pizza maker.
Well,
they look incredible. I'm
putting out a process video from this week's cook, so be on the lookout of that on socials.
Oh boy. But Corey, although you're not a pizza maker, you are a ball knower, as people say. And today we're talking about a guy that I'm just really, really excited to talk about him, Corey, because I know that you're gonna love talking about him. And this is a guy that I already know you're about to go off and get crazy with his breakdown. But we're talking about Bennett Stirtz, who last season played for Drake. This season will be playing at Iowa. I almost said Iona. Is that the New York in me? But Corey, you being our PhD in the pick and roll, break it down. Oh, look at the hat. I love it. Corey, break it down for us. Let's get in the lab. Give us the essentials on Bennett Stirtz.
Yeah, so you mentioned that he came from Drake. He also spent 2 years at Division II Northwest Missouri State before transferring to Drake. So quite the journey for Bennett Stirtz. Last season, when he kind of exploded on the radar, had an incredible statistical profile, 19.2 points per game, 4.3 rebounds per game, 5.7 assists per game to just 2 turnovers. So an insane assist to turnover ratio, 49.8, 39.5, 79.4 shooting splits, 2 steals, 56.6 effective field goal, 60.8 true shooting, 10.3 BPM. This is a 6'4" guard listed at 190 on Iowa's website, which is, I believe, up 10 pounds from last season of what he was listed at Drake. That all sounds phenomenal, right? Like incredibly efficient, fills up the box score. The drawback with him, we talked about the journey. He's going to be 22.7 years old on draft night, so he is a little bit older for a prospect, and we know how that can be used against players around draft night. But this is a kid who has a lot of talent, and not only did he put those numbers up at Drake, but he had good numbers when he played higher level top 50 competition as well, which we can touch on at some point. But really, really interesting prospect to monitor this year, and some would say potentially the top returner, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah. Hey, Corey, I love that you highlighted here at the top his journey. And I think sometimes it's really important to highlight, Corey, if I may, I think you and we have a very interesting journey as well. Not to say that we've made it or we're about to play in the NBA, but if you look at the journey, right, sometimes the journey is so important to break down and to study and to look at. And when you have someone like Stirtz who has overcome as much as he has, right, to get to the point that he's at now. And he's going to be playing at Iowa this year. I understand the concerns with his age. And that's something that Corey, you and I, we've been potting together for years. We've never been afraid of the age stuff, right? Like for us, I think we look at it as like, hey, he's been through the ringer. He's been through all kinds of adversity. And here he is. We may have a better idea, a slightly better idea of what his, final form might be. But still, like we've seen this player be successful and overcome a lot. And I think that's really important. And when we look specifically at his offensive game, Corey, as we get into the nitty gritty here, I think that journey, right, and the maturity that he has on this end of the floor is all connected, right? It's all intertwined with the fact that he's been through a lot. He's learned a lot. And in my cold open, I said he might be the smartest player in college basketball. And that's kind of the headline for me when it comes to his offensive game, Corey. I think he is a guy, and what the first thing I wrote in my notes here, Stirtz is a guy who does not waste any motion. A guy who's extremely cerebral about how he decides to carry himself on the floor. I think every move that he makes, every position that he chooses to be in, every decision he makes with the ball or without the ball is all carefully thought through and calculated. And I think that's the part of his game where if you're not paying close attention to, you might even miss, because there's a lot of intentionality to his game. That it's the old saying, Corey, where some people are playing checkers, it feels like he's playing chess, is some of the vibes that I got from his offensive game. But Corey, if you can, give us some of your thoughts on what you saw from Stirtz on the offensive end of the ball.
Well, the first thing I do want to mention, maybe I should have mentioned it, when we went through his statistical profile, he played 39.4 minutes per game last year. So, when you talk about like the intention and him being cerebral, like this is a kid who's doing this while also having to have the stamina to physically play that way and to think that way, because, it's harder to make smart decisions when you're tired. So this is a kid who's incredibly well conditioned. It's almost, it's like, where do you start with him? Because he has so many layers to his offensive game, right? We could talk about the shooting, 39.5% on 4.6 3-point attempts per game, decent 3-point volume, 7.8 per 100 possessions. So maybe this year, he starts getting them up at a higher clip. I think if he starts getting that 10, 11 per 100 range, we're talking about a pretty ridiculous upside. But the kid's got deep range. He uses ball screens to punish defenses because he's so devastating in these ball screens that it's like you can't go under because he's gonna knock it down in your face. You can't chase over because he's going to get downhill and pick you apart with his in-between game and with his playmaking ability. So when he has the ball in his hands, he just has so many ways to kill you. He's finished 71% on 160 rim attempts, 67% in the half court on 125 attempps. He's got sneaky straight line quickness. He could just hit you all over. And then he hits you with the sneaky athleticism. He had 13 overall dunks, just one in the half court. So he's not going to go put you on a poster, out of a ball screen or anything. But like, he's got the athletic profile. He's got the finishing. He's got the shooting. And then he can play off the ball too. Like, this is a kid, like, knocked down 45% of his catch and shoot threes. 52.4% unguarded on catch and shoot attempts. 37.3 on 150 far two attempts. Like he's just a nightmare from everywhere on the floor. And so, he gets to the free throw line and then he hits free throws at a good clip, nearly 80%. I want to see that up at like 85% this year. Like I want to see him really, really take those shooting numbers up a level. But this is a kid who, like, he plays well against good competition too. Like, the reason for optimism is this is not just like a flash in the pan guy who beat up on mid majors. Is 4 games against top 50 comp, 7.2 BPM, 2.1 to 1 assist turnover ratio, 62% true shooting, 74% at the rim, 43% from 3, 88% from the line in those 4 games. Small sample, but like, we're looking at the top competition that he ended up playing. He balled out in the tournament. Yeah. The kid is just an impact player, and he really was the system at Drake, and you could say that he's an extension of his coach in that regard. And it's maybe there's some system help there, but the kid is just like he's a great basketball player, man. And because he's so efficient, and if he matches his production from last year or builds on it, I'm going to be really interested to see what that conversation looks like. Maybe it's a little different than the Nick Clifford situation, who stayed at Colorado State, and didn't play that top tier talent, but he's going to be in the Big Ten this year, and he's going to be doing it against, big time comp all year round. So, his journey this year is going to be really intriguing to see what that ultimately means for his draft stock, and not just like, the draft stock from the analysts and the draft Twitter sphere.
Corey, I think you mentioning the system stuff is really important, because that's a real talking point that people might bring up. Like, oh, was he just a product of his system? That's something that we see in a lot of different. We see it in football too, right? They call them system quarterbacks, right? Like I don't even know who would be the perfect example of that. Maybe it was like Jeff Garcia back in the day or something like that. But what a throwback!
Who's my guy in Detroit?
Jared Goff,
Yeah.
right? Jared Goff, yeah. Is he just a product of Ben Johnson and Sean McVay? But the reason why, Corey, I think it's so important that you brought that up is because for me, the reason why that doesn't even register on my radar is because of how good he is with ball screens.
Yeah.
And that is such an NBA thing, right? Like, it doesn't matter system or whatever. The way that he's an absolute maestro or master at utilizing ball screens, I think is actually special, Corey. Like, I wrote it in my notes, like the way that he's able to manipulate defenders and get them into like with like different speeds and angles, the way that he's so intentional about coming off tight off of those screens, the way
eye manipulation.
Eye manipulation is really important. The way that he's like so savvy about knowing when to reject screens, when to use them, right? Like the speed in which he comes off of them it's really special. And I think what you talked about before with the burst stuff too, like when he gets going, he gets going. And like, I really think people might sleep on that aspect of his game. I actually think he's fast. And
he's got good straight line speed.
Right. And he's not John Morant, but he's plenty athletic, even at the rim.
There's
quick. There's some really nice finishes with both hands too. Good savvy, good pacing, good angles. Like
his playmaking too out of it.
Some of the playmaking, Corey, is really, really special. And it's like the thing about his playmaking that interests me, Corey, is that like when defenders get tighter and the defense gets tighter and like they try to get physical with him or whatever, like he never ever feels sped up. And he can really find the holes in the defense. And that's why, like, I kind of brought up like the quarterback talk before. And something that I had in my notes is like, he may not have like elite skills, but his one elite skill might be his brain. And in a lot of ways, like, it reminded me of like Tom Brady. Tom Brady never had like elite arm strength, or, he was never like super mobile or whatever, but his brain was elite. He could read everything. When you hear like draft evaluators talk about like an Andrew Luck and the way that he read the game, the way that he was functional as a quarterback, I see a lot of that with Stirtz, where he may not have like top tier elite skill set, frame, length, whatever, but it's his brain that makes up for a lot of that and makes him impactful. And so I think he's going to be really special, Corey. Like, I think there's a lot to be excited about.
Right. And, the coach, he went with the coach to Iowa. So, like, he's going to be in that same system. He's going to have the ball in his hands. He's comfortable. I think they're going to hit the ground running. And like you said, the way that he processes things, on both sides of the ball is, it's really impressive. Obviously, he's going to bread his butter on the offensive side because, he can make shots from everywhere, deep range, at the rim, in between. He can make every pass, hit the roller, paint the corners, he's just an incredibly talented guy that gives him, I think, a pretty safe floor as an NBA player. I was a little surprised he didn't, because of all of his success last year, that he didn't test last year, because I think he would have been a first rounder. But maybe in his mind, he's like, hey, I think I could be a lottery pick if I go and prove it at a higher level. And I don't know if that thinking is wrong.
Yeah, no, Corey, absolutely. And I think overall, like, and going back to the journey talk, maybe for him, he wanted this next step in his journey to play, in the Big Ten, play for Iowa, and then continue to prove himself. And overall, I think offensively, Corey, we kind of went through pretty quickly some of the reason why he's so interesting. And I think a lot of that stuff translates, as you mentioned, to the defensive end of the floor. And we're going to get right into that defense after this break. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments, right? gold bars, whatever you may have. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy to use interface on your laptop or your phone. As we mentioned before, Corey and I, young dads planning for the future, want to set up our kids for financial success and to kind of maybe enjoy some of the things that we didn't having growing up. But overall, for us, if we could having a tool like Monarch Money to organize our finances, to give us a good understanding of where we're at is really, really important. And so for our listeners out there, if you're looking for the same, don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. This pod is also brought to you by Gametime. Guys, I don't know if you can believe it. I don't think we can believe it, but basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache sometimes between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. And that's where Gametime comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. For me, here in Southern California, trying to get maybe Clippers tickets or Lakers tickets to see my Knicks, or for Corey, trying to get tickets to go to Brooklyn and to see some young NBA talent or to see his Chicago Bulls. It can be treacherous sometimes finding tickets, but an app like Gametime that shows you the best deal that you can get, shows you what your seats are going to look like, it's really, really important. And so if you're interested, take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Where terms apply, that's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, and go. All right, Corey, we are back and we're talking defense. It's an important pivotal part of basketball. You got to play defense. And Corey, when it comes to Bennett Stirtz, I think defensively, this is, maybe just me. There may not be as many layers to his defensive game as his offensive game, but there is still a lot to be intrigued by, right? And Corey, the thing that I do want to say, like before I get to the intriguing stuff, the one thing that I think is clear, and you mentioned it before, he's already 10 pounds heavier than what he was listed at last year in Drake. And I think that added mass is going to be important for him as he goes up now a level to play Big Ten basketball, as he plays against tougher competition. The growth in his frame, adding more mass to go up against bigger, faster, stronger guys, I think is going to be important for him, because I do feel like watching his defensive film, there were moments where you could feel the slightness in his frame. And so that's kind of where I wanted to start, Corey. If you can give us some of your thoughts on Bennett's defense.
Yeah. So, some of the quick advance stuff, 3.5 steal percentage, really good. It's a really strong number for him. 0.9 block percentage, decent for a guard, especially a point guard. 13.8 defensive rebound percentage, so he's a good rebounder too, and possessions, right? And that's really important in the modern NBA, where there's a lot of long rebounds, and he can grab the board and then turn that into offense. As far as what he does on the ball, I think he's got quick hands. So, it's not just like playing the passing lanes. I think he's got quick hands to poke the ball away if you leave it out in front. Does a good job staying in front, taking away space, using his length, and timing to contest jumpers. I think sometimes he crosses his feet instead of like sliding. There's a I wouldn't call it a tightness of his hips necessarily, but like, I don't know, he's got like those high hips. You see like a guy like LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Halliburton, they like guys like that have them. I think he kind of has some of that a little bit too. Off the ball, I think he reads the passing lanes well. So, again, he could turn defense to offense, get in transition. I think he does a good job getting slithery, chasing shooters around screens, has a good nose for rebounding the ball, like I mentioned. I think he understands, he uses that brain that you're talking about with his feel and his processing to understand positioning and where he needs to be on the court, so that, he can tag or send a dig or, just kind of muck things up off the ball, which I think is important because, ultimately he's not going to be the guy that is locking guys down. He's not going to be the guy. I don't know how I got where I was in my nightly scrolling that I ended up on like a Davion Mitchell defensive possession from his rookie season, but it was like, end of the game, he needed to, the Kings needed to get a stop, and Davion just like put the absolute clamps on whoever it was and forced like a shot off the backboard and won the game. He's not going to be that on the defensive end. He's not going to be Tari Eason disrupting as an event creator. He's going to be a guy who doesn't hurt your defense.
There it is.
He'll create, steals, he'll get you good offense. He'll rebound the ball. Maybe ultimately he's a positive because he's not breaking the link, on the fence. But, he's not going to be a stopper by any means. He doesn't have the physical tools. He doesn't have the dimension, but he's smart and he knows where to be. And I mean, playing nearly 40 minutes a game to still be able to kind of, have the energy to give effort there, which he'll have to give, he'll be playing less at the NBA level, whether he's, what guys play 34 minutes if they're playing a lot of the game now just to keep them through 82 games. That'll be nothing to him. And he won't have, I think, nearly as much like on-ball responsibility. I think, at the next level he'll share more ball handling duties as he has other guys, and he won't necessarily be like the Steve Nash system, something like that. But I think he's like a solid defender. Like I do. I think he's got a lot of positives, and then, it's just like you said, it's going to see like, can he handle the physicality? Like do those same positives hold up against that higher level competition, which I think they are going to. Because he's old and experienced, and hopefully he gained weight and got stronger. So if all that is true, I think he's going to be fine on that end. But I don't think he projects to be anything special defensively at the next level. It's all going to come from, well, he can survive, so that means that we can use his offense, and that could be special.
I'm actually shocked right now, Corey, just because I was not expecting you to bring up Davion, because I wrote that in my notes. Because
Really?
the thing I wrote in my notes was that he will not be Davion Mitchell. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, he might be the opposite of Davion Mitchell, in that, his main focus is going to be on the offensive end of the floor. And also, Corey, something that's really important that you brought up that is something I thought about a lot while watching his film, and then even trying to come up with comps for him. I actually think his role in the NBA might look very different. Yeah. He may not see the ball as much. He may be more of an off-ball guy, but like obviously like a mix of both, because I do think the on-ball talent is so overwhelming that it would be a waste to not give him opportunities to create, even as like a secondary playmaker. But I think overall, like, he may not see the same type of usage, same type of minutes, right? And so with that being said, maybe we see an uptick in his defense, because I agree with everything that you said, Corey, in that. So the biggest thing I wrote here in my notes is I don't think he's the best lateral mover, but he is a good one.
Yeah.
And I think that's enough, because I think he compensates for the lack of like the elite lateral movement with his intellect and anticipation and just like instincts, right? Mm-hmm. Which I think are important as well. And at the end of the day, I think the way that I thought about it was like, I think he's going to struggle against the elite guards in the NBA, but everyone does. And like, I was like 98% of the league will struggle with those elite guards. And so if he can just fight and battle and stick with them, I think that's more than enough. And I think overall, Corey, where we're landing with Stirtz is that we think he's going to be maybe like a good to solid to maybe just like an average defender, but he's going to bring such an impact on offense that it will that'll be the main calling card with him, the marquee skill with him. And so with that in mind, Corey, I think his offensive skill set with his, decent defensive skill set is definitely going to remind us of some guys who played before or currently playing now. And we'll get into those comps right after this break. Guys, the NFL season, we're in the thick of it now. We're in week 7, if you can believe it. I honestly can't. But right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Last week, I told you guys, what did I say? Giants, right, against the Eagles. That line was too big because it felt like the Giants had some momentum going. They were feeling good, division rival. The Eagles have been weird this season. Hard to understand what that season looks like. So, guys, ultimately, whatever you're feeling in your gut, go with it. Don't wait. FanDuel is the best play to put some bets. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Corey, it's time.
Yes.
Comps, comparisons.
Let's get it.
We've got some guys that I'm sure we're going to talk about, that we're going to be excited about. I have some weird ones, as always. I'm always kind of grasping at some 90s guys, trying to fit a square peg in a circle hole, trying to make it work. But I hope you have fun with it, Corey, and you enjoy some of mine. But Corey, give us some of your comps for Bennett Stirtz.
Okay, so first, maybe like a, lower median end outcome for him. Somebody like Ty Jerome, a guy who, maybe he's your starter in spot minutes. Maybe he's a bench guy. He can run your offense to perfection when he comes in, where he can go and be a threat and get his own, make plays for guys. But then, if he's playing with a Donovan Mitchell, like, he's comfortable operating off ball and he has the positional size to be able to, work off of a guy like that. Ty Jerome, huge year last year, right? Like, kind of a breakout. Like, maybe for him as like an older guy, maybe it takes a couple of years to find that right spot, and then he finds it and he makes a major impact on like a great team. I also think maybe there's like an Austin Reeves outcome, and Austin, another guy who had the ball in his hands a lot in college, and people didn't know necessarily how it would translate. And then it just did, like, right away, because, he's smart and a mother effer and just super skilled, and people overthink the age, but ultimately, like, Austin Reeves is, an incredible number 3 option playing off of 2, top tier number 1 options. But then, LeBron's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks, whatever it is. And he can totally step in as the number 2 guy. And who knows what he might look like if he had his own team on a night to night basis. So, I can mention guys like Malcolm Brogdon, some guys like that who, are below the rim finishers, and, lights out shooters, smart, heady. But I just think that there's a lot of really positive outcomes for him. And whether he comes in like Austin and just is firing all cylinders right away, or it takes him a couple of years to find a spot that makes sense, I think that those are kind of the archetypes of guys that he kind of is similar to.
No, I love that, Corey. I just want to say one thing really quickly. I think this was about 3 years ago. We did a pod, one of our first pods ever, with Mr. Tyler Rucker. And we talked about guys that we're not giving up on. And in that pod, I said Ty Jerome. And I think Rucker laughed at me. And I want to remember this moment. And I want the world to know.
I'm sure we have the tape for that podcast. So we'll go back.
It's going to be somewhere. But I just want to say, I also had Ty Jerome for obvious reasons. But I didn't want to put him like as one of my guys, because I didn't want to do 2 white guy to white guy comps. So I found one guy, Corey, to be my top absolute ceiling outcome for Bennett Stirtz. If this happens, unbelievable. I don't know if that happens, but like, and also it's not a perfect 1-to-1 comp. There are some differences in their games, but I thought of CJ McCollum, Corey, as one guy, right?
I like that.
Yeah, he could potentially be maybe that type of scorer, a guy who's really comfortable on the ball, really comfortable off the ball, can get you a bucket in isolation, is an underrated passer, blah, blah, blah. So I thought of CJ McCollum as one of the guys. The other one is my 90s comp. You guys might hate this one, but if you're old enough, like Corey and I are old enough to remember this guy. And Corey, I want to say, I've never comped anyone from this team during this era because I never felt like it made sense. But for the first time, it made sense. So I have a guy from the 90s Utah Jazz. A guy who was very good on the ball, but never really got to show it because John Stockton was his point guard. Absolute dead eye, lights out shooter, competitor, had a lot of great seasons in Phoenix, in Utah, is forever famous for his free throw routine because he was always saying hello to his 3 kids. I'm talking about Jeff Hornacek, Corey.
Mm.
I thought of Jeff Hornacek just because from my memory and my recollection of his game, obviously was such a dog of a competitor,
Yeah.
was such a good shooter. And if he played in the modern day, I think he would have handled the ball more. Jeff Hornacek was a good passer, a guy who was also very cerebral in how he played the game. And so I know it's not a perfect one-to-one comp, but Jeff Hornacek was a very good NBA player for our younger fans who don't remember. Who relied heavily off of other guards like Kevin Johnson and John Stockton, but was not a guy who could not do things for himself with the ball in his hands. And so those are the 2 guys I thought of, Corey.
I love it. You know, when you said you didn't want to do too many white to white comps, I was like, Byron Scott? I don't know. where are we going?
No, it's just because I wasn't going to do Ty Jerome. You brought him up anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, guys, Bennett Stirtz, obviously a really exciting player. We hope you guys take some time to check out his film before the season starts. But as always, thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. We've got another exciting pod coming out later this week. But until that time, my name's Albert. He's Corey. Thanks for rocking with us.